Good. Okay. Good morning. This is the New York City Board of Standards and Appeals Public Review Session for November 17, 2014. We'll begin with the special order calendar, decision items. Item number 1, 72456BZ, 4242 Francis Lewis Boulevard, Queens.
Okay, with this one, I think we're ready to vote on this one. Community board approved, and there were no further complaints on this. Since the approval, the tow trucks are no longer parked at the site, and the shed was shown on the plan as requested, and the DEP, and they provided the DEP permits for the material storage. Any other comments? Nope. Okay.
Item number 2, 162 and 16395BZ, 3060 and 3074 Westchester Avenue, the Bronx.
I don't have any comments on this. Anyone else?
Okay. Item number 3, 17803BZ, 11402 Van Wyck Expressway, Queens.
I think we just needed confirmation from Exxon that they were going to be changing the slats. If we could just get that. Yes, they are. Okay, so that will be the condition of the grant. Okay.
Item number 4, 4208BZ, 182 Girard Street, Brooklyn.
Okay, with this one, there was a question about whether the new construction is required to comply with FEMA regulations, and though the applicant submitted some materials stating that, for instance, there was a substantial compliance letter issued by the board in February of 2014, it didn't address the subject of a floodplain, so that's not really substantial compliance with respect to floodplain regulations. And since there wasn't really vesting prior to the change in the code because the foundations weren't complete, we've actually asked DOB to opine on whether the floodplain regulations apply here, and so we're going to defer decision on this until we hear back from DOB. We've requested it last week.
Okay.
Any other comments?
Continued hearing items. Item number 5, 69859BZ, 2773 Nostrand Avenue, Brooklyn.
Okay. The only comments that I had is that we would like to get a copy of the remedial action plan and find out and would condition approval on compliance with DEC requirements. So if the applicant could submit the remedial action plan. And any other comments?
No. Item number 6, 82259BZ, 1774 Victory Boulevard, Staten Island.
Okay, with respect to this one, the applicant made a submission with revised plans, a letter, and photos of other sites owned by the same new owner. But I did have a bunch of questions. The letter states that the drawings show planting south of the parking spaces along Manor Road, but unless I don't know where to look, I actually didn't see them on the drawings. Street trees don't count. That's street trees. The planting also should be complying with the planting buffering requirements of Zoning Resolution Section 37-21. Those apply to the buffer between residential and non-residential uses. The applicant should also show on the plans the location of the existing curb cut at the crosswalk and show how it will be modified to clear the crosswalk. There's also description in the statement of facts, in the narrative, that refer to drawing numbers, but because the drawing numbers were cut off in the scanned copy, you can't follow along with the narrative. So just as a general request, and specifically to this one, please make sure when you scan something that you take a look to make sure it's legible before you submit it, because we often get drawings that are completely illegible or they're missing a lot of detail. Also, the widening lines referred to in the narrative are not shown on drawings, or maybe they're too faint to identify, so we can't follow along in the widening argument. The 6-foot high fence is not shown or called out on the plans. And the planting, though shown, should be called out on the plans with the number and types of trees and bushes. The narrative says that there will be more trees, but actually the only difference between the old plan and the new plan is that the template for the tree stamp effectively got bigger. That doesn't mean that there are more trees, that just means the tree stamp is bigger. So we need to know what it is that you will be providing. And similarly, the air and vacuum stations are not called out on the plans nor called out as separated from the adjoining residence by a 6-foot-high fence. The first plan shows the air and vacuum in its existing location denoted by a shape with letter V or A, and the last plan shows it relocated without notation that it is to be relocated. We need to understand that you're actually making these changes so the DOB can understand you're making those changes. Any other comments?
Go ahead.
I just had one comment. I had questioned them about the new HVAC units on their roof, and they're showing that their parapet wall will cover the top of the HVAC units, and that this should be a significant buffer against noise. If they could just maybe give us flesh that out a little bit more. I don't really know what the materials are that they're talking about being this sound attenuation measure. And also it was unclear, I think it was the quality of the drawing or the scan. I couldn't tell exactly how high the building has become with this new parapet that now will, be level with the HVAC unit. It's not clear how tall the HVAC units are. So if they could just clarify that for me, that'd be great.
My question just had to do if there's a DOT requirement between the pedestrian crosswalk and the curb cut, because they seem to join each other. And usually we see at least 5 feet minimum distance between them. And I just wanted to know if there's a DOT requirement and if it complies.
And they were supposed to reconcile the signage between the plans and the analysis sheet, and I didn't see that they made it any clearer.
The signage analysis.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Okay, thank you.
That one? Item number 7, 90279BZ, 109679BZ, 109779BZ, and 14803BZ. This is 111-113 West 28th Street and 116 to 114 West 29th Street, Manhattan.
Okay. The applicant made a lot of very good submissions that really did clarify the application, including a map showing each site and its ownership and development potential in 2003 at the time of the variance, and a list of hotels developed in the area, their pre-filing NB dates and their TCO dates, and there was also a study regarding hotel activity during the period from 1999 to 2006, which showed a significant decline in room occupancy and rates in 2001, which held until 2003. So it's a much better submission. I thank them for that. I think that there is a good argument made for the decline in hotel development during that time period, but I would say that probably the best argument that could be made, and maybe the applicant could speak to that tomorrow at the hearing, is that the site wasn't yet ripe to receive the development rights due to its ownership conditions at the time, even though the economy by that time was on an upswing, and had the site been ripe, it's very possible that those development rights could have sold to a hotel. Any other comments?
Well, I just thought in the Freeman Fraser report, he talks about the significant amount of time to develop a proposal prior to submitting DOB plans, and there were 2 proposals submitted to the DOB in 2005. So I would just like them to elaborate, well, then how does this not impact, I would think that they're, planning for those 2 hotels took 2 years, or how much time are they talking about? And why wouldn't this site be included in the thinking of potential hotel site.
Right. That's good, okay. Okay.
Okay. Item number 8, 96487BZ, 786 Burke Avenue in the Bronx.
Sorry. Lots of notes. Okay, in this one, the applicant showed photos of the site being cleaned and provided drawings with the proposed changes to bring the signage into compliance with the zoning, and also provided drawings to show the proposed work, including the planting. I just note from those photos that the fencing is still in poor condition, so there will need to be an improvement on the fencing. With respect to the plantings, the drawings only show that the planting will be maintained, not that the size or density of planting will be increased, as stated in the cover letter. Also provide the quantity and types of plantings to be maintained. The statement of facts was to have been revised to reflect a lot of the issues we discussed in the last hearing, and it has not been revised. The plans that were provided are also provided in very light color, which is extremely difficult to read, and in addition to which, as part of the record, we need to have copies of the plans that are scannable, and this very light color is not scannable. So the applicant should provide a set of plans that are in black line and legible. Our response to this application will be conditioned on prior to permit, the site being maintained in a clean condition, the chain link fence provided with opacity to shield the neighbors that will be replaced or repaired, the signage reduced to conform to plans provided, work on the completed building would be as shown on the drawings, plantings to be installed, maintained as shown on the drawings, and junk cars, if stored on site, must be stored within an enclosure, and that a C of O must be obtained. Obviously not prior to permit. Anybody else?
I think that they just had an error in how many bays that they're retaining. I think in one place they state that they're retaining 2 bays, but their plans show that they have 3 actual bays. So it's not clear what their intention is. If they could just make sure that it's all coordinated.
And they redid their signage, and they're accounting for almost all of the signs, which is good. However, there are a couple of what look like temporary signs that are vertical signs that are like by the pumps that need to either be accounted for or removed.
Commissioner Montanez?
Nothing new.
Okay.
Item number 9, 20392BZ, 70-20 Austin Street, Queens.
I just note that the applicant submitted plans showing that the fire alarm is indeed connected to the fire department. The statement of facts included a fire safety plan, all of these things that we asked for. They provided proofs of Department of Buildings approved signage and of an approved public assembly permit. So, and I had no comments otherwise on this. Anyone else?
No.
Okay. New cases, item number 10, 83352BZ, 591630 Foster Avenue, Brooklyn.
Okay, one second. Okay. This is a very simple application for extension of term on a gasoline station. It's a simple, sorry. The application looks good, except that the slats in the chain link fence at the perimeter are shabby and should be repaired. It seems to me that these slats are ultimately not a great solution. They seem to not last very long, but that's the way they started off. Maybe in future people could think about other kinds of fencing solutions that are opaque, like picket fence, that kind of thing. That the wall along the property line is in really bad shape and should be painted. And I did have a question I'd like clarification on. There's an iron picket fence that appears in the photos, in some of the photos, but doesn't show on the existing plan. And I'm just wondering, has that been removed? It probably was a before and after, but I just want clarification because the photographs are in conflict with each other. And there's barbed wire on one of the fences. To which owner does that barbed wire belong? To this owner or the adjoining property? And there's also the curb cuts are still wider than 30 feet, and they were wider than 30 feet in the prior grant, so they do need to be reduced to what was permitted, to the 30 feet. Any other comments?
Item number 11, 16404BZ, 2241 Westchester Avenue, the Bronx.
Okay, this is a special permit for a physical cultural establishment, and I just need some clarification from the statement of facts. It says, because it's an extension of a term, so the statement of facts says that the PCE will be equipped with an interior fire alarm system, and since it's an existing establishment, isn't that already in place? So if yes, then the statement of facts needs to be amended to reflect that. The letter to Community Board 10 indicates that the fire alarm and sprinkler system are functioning and signed off, and so there's conflict in that application. And also, if there's an ECB violation related to AC units on the roof and work without a permit, is that related to this use? And if so, what's the condition on resolving that violation? And the photographs show that there's graffiti on the building, which if in control of the applicant should be removed, but since the landlord is in some way responsible for this approval as well, the landlord needs to be persuaded to take care of the graffiti. Any other comments?
There's a lot of graffiti also on the roof bulkheads, and it looks as if in that area, like there are a few buildings, they're all suffering from a similar problem, probably because of the location is really like heavily trafficked, but they really need to be on top of it and at least show a regular plan for removal, because it's probably something that's going to have to be done monthly.
Okay. Any other comments?
No.
Okay.
Appeals calendar, continued hearing items. Item number 12, 300-0AA, 3935 27th Street, Queens. We received a request for adjournment till December 16th.
Yes. So that will be adjourned to the 16th,
Submission the 20th.
and submission will be the 25th of November.
Item number 13, 9514A, 237 East 76th Street, Manhattan. We received a request for adjournment till January.
Till January, okay. Okay, I don't actually, well, we'll talk tomorrow about the exact adjournment date. Okay. I mean, the new hearing date.
New
Okay.
cases, item number 14, 265 14A, 266 14A, and 267 14A. This is Seagate Clusters, 3740, 3742, and 3818 Atlantic Avenue, Brooklyn.
Okay. My only comment with this is just to ask the applicant whether two forms of front yard mitigation pursuant to 6461 were provided, if they could just address those issues. Any
They
other
added a
comments?
note to the
Yeah.
plans.
Oh, they did?
Yeah.
Yeah, we
saying
asked
that
them to
they-
add a note.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't see the note. Okay, good.
I got it this morning.
Ah. So they're telepathic. Okay, thanks.
Zoning calendar, decision items. Item number 15, 32313BZ, 127 East 71st Street, Manhattan.
Okay, with this one, the only thing missing, unless it appeared this morning and I missed it, is LPC approval, which is sort of critical. We can't vote on this unless there was LPC approval.
LPC approval.
So if the applicant could submit that immediately. Otherwise, we'll have to defer decision on this. I just wanted to add also that really excellent materials were provided in support of the position that the rear yard incursion is similar in scale and proportion to the neighbors. And also, at the hearing on 9/23, we gave an opportunity for opposition to submit on this application, but to date have not received anything. Any other comments?
Item number 16, 9314BZ, 455 West 37th Street, Manhattan.
Okay, we did get a letter, actually, it was kind of nice. After the hearing, we got a letter from the upstairs neighbor stating that the club is not a source of noise and that that noise tests were conducted. I think it was 2 neighbors, actually. Given that it sounds like the club is being a good neighbor, I don't have any issues with this application. Anyone else?
Item number 17, 9714BZ, 2226 East 14th Street, Manhattan.
Okay. Did we receive the certificate of appropriateness on the signage? We did. Yes?
We received sign-offs on the permits for the signage.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there is a C of A in the file.
There is a set. Okay, good. So then I didn't have any comments on this. Anyone else?
Item number 18, 114BZ, 1490 Macombs Road, the Bronx.
Okay. Again, I had no comments on this.
Item number 19, 10414BZ, 282 South 5th Street, Brooklyn.
And no comments on this. Both of these are physical culture establishment special permits.
Item number 20, 150-14BZ, 30 Broad Street, Manhattan.
Okay. With this special permit for physical culture, we had submissions of plans showing the separation between the fitness center and the adjoining community facility space, and to indicate that there is no common demising walls with residential use, which was the concern because there's a residential tower above it. We received fire department and Department of Investigation sign-off, and we have the community board approval, so I don't have any further comments. Does anyone else?
Continued hearing items, item number 21, 15311BZ, 2711 30th Avenue, Queens.
Okay, this one we were asked to adjourn. We weren't given a specific date, so we'll talk about it tomorrow, I don't think.
Item number 22, 2-13BZ, 438 Targee Street, Staten Island.
Okay, with respect to this, we did receive a revised statement. This is a variance request on a little triangular site. We did receive a revised statement of facts, which includes discussion of 4 other triangular properties in the area, each significantly larger than the subject and developed with residential use. That was helpful, thank you. The statement of facts briefly touches on the financial tie-in to the A finding, in that the small size of the lot makes conforming development infeasible. That was not as clear as it should be, but it does address the issue. And we received revised signage calculations, so I don't have any further comments. Does anyone else?
I would just like the applicant to clarify if the existing sign complies with the signage analysis, because it just seemed like it was larger to me. And also, I'm not sure if we ever discussed the hours of operation for the new business, for the additional business.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Item number 23, 17413BZ, 2449 Morris Avenue, the Bronx.
Okay, that one, we were also asked for an adjournment for a hearing on December 9th and a submission on the 18th, assuming that they can do it, because that's tomorrow. And if they can't, then please let us know and we'll revise the hearing date.
Item number 24, 19313BZ, 4770 White Plains Road, the Bronx.
And that one also, we were asked to adjourn until January 13th. I suppose we could have a submission on December, what's our last hearing? Sorry.
16th.
December 16th.
Item number 25, 22213BZ, 2472 Coney Island Avenue, to Brooklyn.
This one, we were asked for a very long adjournment in the future, and I think it would be easier to just take this off the calendar until the applicant is ready to submit. So otherwise, we keep adjourning and it's no need.
Okay. Item number 26, 25413BZ, 2881 Nostrand Avenue, Brooklyn.
Do you have it? This one has been to many, 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 many hearings. I have to admit, I came in late to this story. It's been going on since February, and there have been many, many hearings. And I know that the applicant has been asked to look at a lot of different scenario. But I note in now being involved in it with the prior hearing in September, and then looking at the more recent submission, that this proposed development will have a very significant impact on the neighborhood, and so far, quite a negative impact. It's quite let's say, a not unattractive building where there's been no effort at all to make it attractive. And it's a neighborhood that's generally characterized by 1- and 2-family houses. So I would wonder why the applicant, for instance, can't look at a lesser variance where, for example, maybe it's a 2- to 3-family attached houses. I'm also curious about why, for example, it isn't built from side lot line to side lot line, allowing just a drive under to get to the parking behind. That would make it more consistent with neighborhood character and also use up floor area in those very, very wide side yards that are basically parking, really driveways. There's only 2 parking spaces shown on the last plans in one of the driveways, and I see no reason why if head-in parking is possible on one half of the site, it isn't possible on the other half of the site. So I'm completely not understanding the premise for the layout of this building. And from an aesthetic point of view, from a neighborhood character point of view, the building really needs to be articulated to read like row houses and be brought down in height and to use materials that are consistent with neighborhood context. So despite its many, many hearings, I just don't see that this is appropriate yet for this district, for this neighborhood. Any other comments?
Well, they did change the layout of the first floor, and one of the things I was hoping that they could do is add some landscaping in the side yards, which now what they put a lot of parking in the side yard instead of in the rear makes it not possible. So I agree with you to some degree that the lack of a front yard, the lack of landscaping, and doesn't make it a very attractive building.
Any other comments?
Okay. That's it. Next one. Item number 27, 26413BZ, 257 West 17th Street, Manhattan.
Okay. This is an application for a special permit for a CrossFit gym, and we've been working with the applicant and to deal with noise nuisance that's been caused by this gym, and they've been very cooperative in actively at this moment. They sent us on Friday photographs and Thursday photographs of the hung ceiling. That's acoustical ceiling actually being hung at the moment. You can see all the workers in there. You can see all the ceiling grid. They actually sent us photographs to show that the spring isolators that are hung from the concrete slab were in fact installed, as opposed to what often happens not installed. So they're actually using that. And then we also got a letter from their noise consultant indicating that the ceiling system would work better if it was pulled away from the perimeter walls and the columns by 1/2 inch instead of 1/4 inch, and that a particular, I forget what it was, open-celled or closed-celled rubber isolator would be used, but the better one would be used. And so they are making the correction to the installation for that. And I personally really appreciate their cooperation, and we will keep monitoring this as the work proceeds, and then they do more noise testing, and then they figure out how to deal with the floor. So any other comments?
I agree that they've been pretty responsive to your instructions, and it seems like they're trying to do their best to resolve the situation. I'm just a little troubled by the building's consultant, Acoustalog, because this has happened in the previous set of submissions where Acoustalog has been present for whatever modifications have been done, and when asked by the applicant to give feedback and comment, the Acoustalog consultant has reserved his comments to himself and I guess he's waiting to come to the hearing to make the comments, but it just seems to me that he should be weighing in when he's asked by the applicant before all of these adjustments are made permanent, because this is a lot of money that the applicant's spending. And if the applicant's spending over $100,000 to put in a ceiling, it's really not helpful if the Acoustalog consultant waits until the hearing to say, oh, no, you did it wrong. That's not fair, really. You know, the applicant is clearly trying to do his best, and I think that in this case, the Acoustalog consultant should be speaking when he's asked questions and not withholding information to give it to us later.
Right, I agree with that. And in particular, they were recently asked to come for a site visit, did come for a site visit, were asked if they had any comments, said they did but didn't give them.
Right.
And that is absolutely, we're trying to aid the applicant or encourage the applicant to resolve the situation so it stops being a nuisance, and the building's consultant is not helping in that. If he has other ideas, they would implement those ideas. The ceiling is open now, but it's going to be closed in about 2 weeks, and it'll be too late to do anything without enormous expense, which would be unfair, ultimately. Okay, well, I agree with that. Any other comments? Okay.
Item number 28, 27113BZ, 129 Norfolk Street, Brooklyn.
Okay, so this one, a few things, quite a few things, actually. So the applicant submitted plans to explain better the existing side yard condition, but I'll leave Commissioner Hinkson to continue to comment on that. But the first thing that I wanted to talk about is this is a building in a floodplain area that is going to need to be lifted. It's currently a little one-story, for lack of a better word, bungalow, because that's sort of a throwback to the old beach days, and so it looks like a little bungalow. And given what I know of houses being raised in serious floodplain areas, and I know the applicant's representative is very familiar with that, I find it hard to believe that this house will actually be lifted because, for one, the house was built on probably a little bit of a nothing foundation. It was not designed to be sitting on stilts, and now arguably is going to be asked to do that, and it seems kind of difficult to imagine the house would be lifted. So, and the drawings show two opposing walls to be retained at the first floor, but they show also on the grade level cellar the retention of these two opposing walls, but they also show those two opposing walls being retained on the first story of the building, which is sort of an ontological impossibility given that it's a one-story house. So, so that raises more questions for me. The reason that this is an issue is this special permit is designed for enlargements, not new construction. So if it is going to be for new construction as a result of demolition, the applicant really needs to look at how they might make an argument that this special permit applies in this case. For example, to look at case law and board precedent for situations where a building was required to be demolished because of some, say, regulation or some lack of structural integrity, and whether the board was able to grant in a situation like that. So I would encourage the applicant to look at how they will support the idea that this is actually new construction on the site. The other thing that's quite critical in this application is there's a proposal on the drawings to access that first floor that's raised by a side yard staircase that goes to a raised porch, and then the staircase goes back down to the side yard, and that's how you get to the rear. We actually sent the plans to the fire department, and they were not okay with the obstruction of the only access to the rear yard. It's a 4'3" wide yard, 4'3" wide yard, and there's no yard on the other side. And the fire department stated that the fire department would have no access to the sides and rear of the building. This design would require that all entry attempts be conducted from the front, which would hinder access to the interior. The fire department recommends that a design change be made which would preserve a passable side yard giving access to the rear yard. And so that means a new design for the project, and I understand there's a parking space and all that, so you really need a parking place underneath the house, so that really needs to be reworked. And then in terms of the drawings, the elevations show a completely different attic configuration than the axonometric does. The axonometric shows a single pitched roof running perpendicular to the length of the house, while the elevations and sections show an even more massive and awkward double pitch, which leads to the issue about the height and the massing of the building. With respect to the building height, the streetscape study, which was very well done, and thank you, and the block elevations show that the proposed building height will be significantly taller than its neighbors, reading as a 4-story building with the attic included. Since the reason for the attic is for mechanical space and storage, the attic should be reduced in size, and the height of the attic peak should be reduced so that it is more in line with the height of the neighbors. The reason for this is obviously because there is a neighborhood character finding, and I'm very concerned about negative impact on neighborhood character, and really a shift in the character of the neighborhood as a result caused by this one project. And then just in terms of clarity on the drawings, the finished material at the grade level was not shown, if that could be shown. Any other comments on this?
Go ahead. I don't mean to be sort of anal retentive about the issue of this 4'3" side yard, but I'm going to be. They gave us a couple of drawings that, in their explanation, was that they have this bump out and they're just taking off the bump, and that the actual I guess, side wall is not really perpendicular or runs parallel with the side lot line, and at one point it's 4'3". That's all well and good, but they're telling us now that that wall is now going to be retained at 4'3", one thing, which begs the question, if it's not parallel to your side lot line, you're changing where that side wall is. I mean, they say they go down to 3 foot something. So they're actually either removing a portion of the foundation and moving it to 4'3". But do they have a survey that just shows where the existing non-compliant wall is? And it's very confusing on the drawings that they've shown. Mm-hmm. You start adding up the numbers and they don't add up to 4'3" or 3'8". So, yeah, I'm going to give them one more push and ask them give me a survey showing all of the points that they're talking about.
Okay, well, I think to pick up on that, if in fact, as I suspect, the house is actually going to be demolished and the applicant is able to come up with a good legal argument based on BSA precedent and case law, then all acknowledging that this is a required demolition as a result of regulation, I would say that there isn't any reason to rely on that 4'3" side yard, and it can be pulled back to an appropriate width. That would help the fire department. I would think that the property owners would want to know that the firefighters can get back in the event of a fire, and et cetera. So I think the applicant should look at that.
I have a question for the fire department, because I think that's actually an interesting letter that they wrote, that they would want there to be a larger side yard so they could reach the rear. Well, what happens with all of the attached homes in the city? I mean, it just seems to me that the fire department is requiring that this property owner provide what probably at least half of all the properties in New York City don't have, which is 2 side yards. So surely the fire department has a way of fighting fires in the rear of buildings that are attached. And so what I would want to know is, why is this so important to the fire department for this one property?
I do have one guess on that, which has to do with fireproof construction. When they're attached, there's a different, when they're attached, there's different demising wall requirements. When they're close to each other, there's different sidewall requirements. And when they're built too close and they don't fulfill either of those fire requirements?
Throughout the city, it seems to me that there are old-styled houses that are clapboard houses that are abutting, with very little space in between them. So I would like the fire department just to address it. Perhaps there is a serious reason why. It would be helpful for me, because I'm not convinced by what I'm reading.
And I have a comment along the same line as Commissioner Otley Brown. I see that this is a passable space from the front to the rear. You have to go up a set of stairs, along a platform, and down a set of stairs. But I would see the 4'3" as being a reasonable side yard for access to the rear. And I also wanted to point out that at prior hearings, I was concerned also about the bulk of the building at the front and the neighborhood character finding, and what they did, because they originally had a double height space in the bedrooms in the front, they brought that roof all the way down, so now the height of the building is really about in the middle of the house. It's much less prominent on the street wall. So I felt that they had complied with what I had requested there.
But the drawings are actually conflicting with each other. So it actually shows 2 different attics. So one of them is a massive double attic, and one of them is a single attic. So, and if it's just for mechanical, there's no reason why it can't drop down a little, because it's actually not a sleeping purpose. So either it's for mechanical or it's not for mechanical. Okay.
Item number 29, 5-14BZ, 1807 East 22nd Street, Brooklyn.
This one also, we were asked for an adjournment to January 27th with a submission on January 13th.
Item number 30, 2514BZ, 1601, 1623 Avenue J, Brooklyn.
And this one also adjourned to December 9th with a submission date of November 25th.
25th. Item number 31, 3814BZ, 116 Oxford Street, Brooklyn.
Okay, this one is quite similar in terms of issues to the Norfolk Street project. This one does have 2 side yards, both of which are very narrow, but so we also sent it to the fire department, and I don't think we've gotten a response yet from them. So if the fire department could speak to that tomorrow. So the issue with this one is the revised plans show an 8-foot rear yard at the jagged rear lot line, removing the parking pad and front yard mitigation streetscape photos and history of subdivision and bump out into the side yard. The applicant argues that a rear yard isn't, that an 8-foot rear yard along this rear lot line is what is required by the zoning, but it's actually a misreading of this section of the zoning resolution, which I know intimately. This section in the rear yard regulation only applies to rear yards facing other rear yards where the rear yard extends from the rear lot line away from the street line. These rear yards extend from the rear yard line towards the street line. So it's a situation of a flag lot. And though there are rear lot lines on this lot that where the rear yard extends away from the street line, that's the opposite case here. So in this situation, a 30-foot rear yard would be required. However, the applicant didn't seem to note that within this section of the lot, it's within 100 feet of a corner. So had they realized that there's actually no rear yard requirement, and that's what the response should have been. So that should be corrected. But what does need to be discussed is the relationship of this house to the adjoining property with respect to the side yard incursion. And also, because there's still this very large bump out that's being retained. Some of it is being removed that goes into the neighbor's property, but some of it's being retained and kind of rebuilt. And what is that incursion about? What does that do to the neighbor? Especially because it's going up 2 more stories. And there isn't any justification for the reduction of the rear yard to 20 foot 8 inches. You need to show the impact on the adjoining rear yards. Just for your information, the submission is labeled with the wrong calendar number. It's for another application. Then going back to the subject, this is in a district, again, that's subject to the FEMA regulations. The house is being lifted. So again, because it's just a little 1-story bungalow, I question whether it's actually going to be lifted. The same question applies. Can the applicant make an argument that there is BSA precedent for approving construction approving this special permit where the demolition of the building was required due to some kind of government action or regulation. And then, again, the drawings in this case show 3 walls to be retained at the first floor, but they also show 3 walls to be retained at the grade level cellar, and so I ask again, how is that existentially, ontologically possible? And if the building, and then the streetscape study and the block front elevation show this house as much higher and more massive than others on the block. That the massing of this should also be brought down to be in line with the height of the neighbors. It now reads as a 4-story house where 3 stories are atypical on the block. The dormers also, again, inconsistencies with drawings. The dormers in the roof plan look much smaller than the dormer shown in the side elevation. Measurements should be provided so we can understand the accuracy of that. And the section AA is inaccurately depicting that dormer situation. It should be shown accurately there. There's also an odd element on the side of the building at the attic level on the north elevation. I don't know what that is, if that could be explained. There's mechanical back there. It looks like it might be related to the mechanical system, but it's off-center. It's very odd. So, and also 2 forms of front yard mitigation should be provided pursuant to section 6461. Any other comments on this? Over my issues.
I just would like to say, the whole idea of, complying with the flood regulations in these sorts of neighborhoods with the new design zoning requirements sort of puts you in a quandary where these buildings inherently are going to be taller than the existing homes in the neighborhood, so it's a matter of, a give and take or whatever.
Right, but the mass of the attic is often, kind of overblown when it doesn't really need to be. And just by bringing it down a little bit, you come more in line with the height of the neighboring buildings as opposed to towering above them. Because it's kind of, the finding we need to make is the neighborhood character finding. And as opposed to houses that are lifted as of right and following as of right rules in the future, if the neighborhood character shifts as a result of as of right behavior, that's a different thing. But today, we look at neighborhood character, and the streetscape tells us that the houses are at sometimes, but not typically, 3 stories in height, and this one is effectively 4. So shrinking it down a little bit, not being so grandiose, will bring it closer to what's consistent with character and not have our approval function essentially as a blight on the neighborhood, is my opinion about that.
But is it really a blight on the neighborhood when the future character is going to take into account that you're allowed to build 35 feet above the new floodplain? I mean, because this is clearly a neighborhood that's going to be in transition because it's on the waterfront. And so it seems to me that if the legislation that was put in place to encourage people to raise their houses also understood that they should also be allowed the 35 feet height above the new elevated floodplain, then it's a statement to me that the city acknowledges that in the future, these neighborhoods are going to be higher in appearance. And so therefore, just because somebody is asking for a home enlargement now at this point in time, at the very beginning, it may seem like it might not be in total character, but given the fact that people will, as of right, who aren't even getting the enlargement, be able to be 35 feet above the elevated floodplain, then it seems to me that, well, if the character of the neighborhood is going to be in transition anyway, how out of character is this?
Well, but it's out of character because it's only a 0.5 FAR zone, and these are significantly larger houses, so where will you get the floor area to reach that 35-foot height?
True, but well, I think that even in other neighborhoods where there's a 35-foot tall height without the special permit, many houses do reach 35 feet tall with the attic. Many do. It's just that they're probably more.
Yes. So that's part of it. The mass of the house goes to the neighborhood character. So if you're talking about increasing mass and taking advantage of height, that overwhelms a neighborhood that's not accustomed to large mass. So you have to accommodate. You have to ameliorate mass with a reduction in height. Otherwise, it becomes overwhelming.
Understood, but when the special permit is available in this neighborhood, I think it contemplates that you're going to have more mass and more height. That's all. I mean, I suppose we'll be seeing how, I guess, things do.
But I think
go
that's
in the
actually
future.
city planning's job. I don't think that's our job.
Well, that's why they put in the visual mitigation measures
Yes.
to some degree to cut that height and to make it look more in line with the rest of the homes in the neighborhood.
But that's really about the
recognizing-
first floor. It's
Right, but
about
that's
dealing
what you
with
see,
that
yeah.
really unattractive first floor that doesn't have windows, that doesn't have access. It's not really mitigating the height of the building. It's mitigating that strange abandoned sort of first floor, which they're still working on, and I know city planning's working on more resiliency design issues. So hopefully they'll address this better. They know that there's a problem here. So, okay, thanks.
Item number 32, 9614 BZ, 290 Dyckman Street, Manhattan.
32. What happened? Sorry. Yes, sorry, wrong thing. Okay. I just have a lot of notes on this. Okay, so, yes, so the applicant revised the financials and made it much clearer by applying the hotel analysis to the self-storage. That made it much more in line with typical BSA analyses as opposed to making it kind of about a business and what the business does independent of the space. They also revised the plans to make clear what the non-rentable space is and to tie the drawings and the statement of facts into the financials. But, you know, just for ease of reading's sake, those two things should have matched each other from the beginning instead of requiring hours and hours of explanation on the part of lots of consultants. They also revised the traffic study showing that the number of trips by automobile versus non-automobile, and the traffic on and Dykeman and Henshaw, explaining that that deliveries by automobile are not the peak traffic times on Dykeman, and that it's unlikely that the traffic pattern will send users to Henshaw, so that the congestion will not be increased by this use. They also made a lot clearer to me, anyway, that the visits to your stuff don't use many taxis or other vehicles. I guess people just come and like pet their things and leave. So I didn't realize that, not owning a storage myself. And so I think, though I didn't have any comments on this, I think it's a much better application. Anyone else?
I had no further comment. I appreciated their clarification on the traffic issue, which was something I was concerned with, and so I have no further comments.
No issues. No, it's good.
Thank you.
Item number 33, 13214BZ, 441 Rockaway Avenue, Brooklyn.
Okay, the applicant provided on this physical cultural establishment photographs showing that they repaired and painted the facade and removed the barbed wire. Thank you. And provided a map showing the locations of the distance of public transportation to the site, so that made it clear that this is well served. And so I didn't have any other comments. Anyone else?
No.
Okay. New cases, item number 1, 32113BZ, 3719 104th Street, Queens. Why did they enumerate this?
Okay, so this application is in part me beseeching the applicant to please be clear about their argument, because I spent not less than 2 hours trying to figure out what they were talking about. One is that there is a uniqueness issue. How do you establish on the A finding, based on this radius diagram that shows every lot in the area is the same width or narrower? The statement of facts says something completely untrue, which states that most of the lots within the study area have a 35-foot width, when the radius diagram shows that most, in fact, are 25 feet width and under, just exactly like the site. So there you are reading the application saying, where's the uniqueness finding? So this is a vacant lot. So the applicant would have to prove that it's unique in being a vacant lot, and that a two-family isn't viable on this lot, where side yard requirements are less strict than they are for a three-family. So it sounds like a self-created hardship right there from the start. And then the statement of facts does not discuss the impact of a multifamily house on the neighborhood, or the preponderance of one and two family versus three family, although the land use map does show there are other three families. So the whole thing is the reader trying to figure out what the applicant is saying the whole time. What is going on here? That's not our role. The role of the applicant is to make an argument. The statement of facts also doesn't discuss how the change from an R6B zoning district to an R5 was intended to preserve or modify certain characteristics in the area, so larger lots are needed for multifamily development. For instance, there's a minimum 3,800 square foot lot with a 40-foot width for detached buildings. The site plan shows adjacent properties improve with buildings close to but not on the side lot line. That's not discussed. And there is an error in the statement of facts that states that the proposal is for a four-family house when it's actually for a three-family house, so, help. So, but that's not what the issue is here at all, excuse me. The issue here is that the section 23-32 provides that for 1 and 2 family dwellings, R5 regulations require a 3,800 square foot minimum lot size and a 1,700 minimum lot size for other buildings. And this is a 2,500 square foot lot. So what happened was, in the rezoning from an R6B to an R5, this site was forced to comply with multifamily dwelling requirements, because the lot size isn't 3,800 square feet. So then you're faced with this quandary of the side yard regulations for a multifamily house, which are 8-foot side yards, and you're not even looking at a lesser variance, maybe, that's a 1 or 2 family house with what is the side yard requirement for the 1 and 2 family house in this case, because it's measured off of the adjoining properties. But that's only an issue if these properties were not owned separately and individually. This site was not owned separately and individually from all other adjoining tracts of land, both on December 15th, 1961, and on the date of the application for a building permit. The applicant provides, like, all of this stuff about the history of these 2 lots, 41 and 42. Doesn't show us what 41 and 42 looked like before they became 41 and 42. Just goes on, and there's all of this listing of the names of the owners and all of that, and tells us not one reason why all that material is provided. It's a complete mystery. So the fact is that the entire case hinges on whether a waiver, whether DOB views that as a lot having existed separately and independently in 1961 and on the day of the permit, which is now. So I actually don't think this application is ready to proceed. The applicant has to go back and get from DOB a determination based on the facts of the so-called tax lot subdivision. I understand there were 2 separate houses on this tax lot. So what does DOB consider was the size of the lot in 1961? We can't determine that. That's a DOB determination. I think the applicant has to go and find that stuff out, and then we decide what is the scope of the variance, because we don't even know the threshold question. And I beg you, please stop submitting applications that make no sense. Anybody else?
That covers it.
Yowza.
Because 2 hours is far too much time to put into that application, excuse me.
Next. Item number 2, 32913 BZ, 145 Girard Street, Brooklyn.
This one, there was a request to adjourn to December 9th with a submission date again of November 18th, if that's possible to do in the short time, namely tomorrow. If not, please let us know.
Item number 3, 9414 BZ, 1150 East 22nd Street, Brooklyn.
Okay, this is an application for a 73622 special permit. These are my comments. The statement of facts states that the building hasn't changed since it was built in the 1920s, I think. But the rear extension was not shown on a 1929 Sanborn, and no later Sanborn maps were provided, so I don't really understand that. How do you establish that that was built at the time that the building was built, or even prior to 1961? We don't see that, or pursuant to a permit, we don't see that. Photographs of other large houses within the radius are useful and well labeled. I actually really appreciated this application because, in part because the drawings are hand-drawn. Yay. There's amazing dexterity on a hand-drawn drawing where when you have an idea, you just draw it and you don't have to think about how to program it. So you get more information where you need it. So, and it also, the photographs are really well labeled. It indicates the BSA approval on the photographs, the floor area, the address. It's very helpful. But we also need to understand in the context of this application the streetscape photo montage showing both sides of the block with the proposal inserted. It's not clear from the key on the drawings which portion of the house is to remain and which is new. The drawings actually read as if the existing wall will be doubled with a new wall, so I'm not really understanding what's happening there. Is it a fiction, or is it really being maintained? The rear yard incursion, to reduce it to 20 feet, needs to be discussed with its impact on the neighbors. So at the moment, there's a proposal to reduce the rear yard to 20 feet and to put in a garage and a rear porch that effectively leaves the rear yard as a little tiny square of maybe 8 by 8. That's not a rear yard anymore. As we've requested on some other applications, that garage should be removed if the rear yard proposal is still in the picture, or the rear yard has to be increased in size. You can't fill it up with all the stuff and then remove all the open space. There's a notation that there's a front porch in the required rear yard. That's not something that we can approve with this special permit, so there needs to be a notation that DOB has to approve that front porch. And just note that it's generally an attractive design, but the building is still massive compared to immediate neighbors based on that street elevation. So height adjustments should be made to make the building not higher than the neighbors. And those are my comments. Anybody else?
Or they could widen the streetscape to see, more homes in the area that it might be similar to. And I just had a question regarding the rear garage I can see pulling in, but I can't really imagine getting out of there.
Oh.
Maneuverability
Yeah.
would
so
seem
that's
very
another-
difficult.
Yeah, that's another thing. Very careful driving, Okay.
I think he's indicating on his drawings about the foundation that they intend to in some way beef up their foundation to be able to support, additional floors. So if that's what he's intending, maybe he just needs to make a note to that effect.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Item number 4, 11914BZ, 1151 3rd Avenue, Manhattan, second and third floor.
Okay, this is actually kind of a bunching of three
Should I call
related.
three
You
of
might
them,
as well.
or-
Well,
or
I don't know, they're
they're separate
individual
owners.
uses.
They're
They're
separate
different
uses.
owners and uses.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because this is a building that's going to be entirely occupied by, or actually, there was a prior occupancy of physical cultural establishment. So this is essentially occupying the entire building with PCEs, which is probably a great thing for upstairs and downstairs neighbors to all have similar uses. I didn't actually have any comments about this. We've already received fire department and Department of Investigation sign off. Anybody else?
Item number 5, 12014BZ, 1151 3rd Avenue. This is for the 5th floor.
Okay, and same comments. We received those sign offs also.
Item number 6, 12114BZ, 1151 3rd Avenue, Manhattan. This is for the 4th floor.
4th floor. Everybody is a family together. No, that's good. Okay. Sounds like a great place to go. You just go from one floor to the next, getting stronger and stronger and more relaxed. I think there's a yoga studio somewhere in here.
Item number 7, 15114BZ, 19 West 21st Street, Manhattan. It's also a PCE.
Again, this one is the first floor of a 12-story commercial building, so happily, even though it's a one-room yoga studio, you can't get quieter than that. But let's just say they decided to throw in a CrossFit activity at the end of the class or something. It wouldn't be a problem so much because it's a commercial building. So any other comments?
This concludes the executive session for November 17, 2014. Joshua, can you get the camera? Yes. It's Ryan Singer.
Are we actually doing an afternoon session?
1 o'clock for the new cases. So there'll be a break. Hopefully. If not, then, there'll be a lunch break. Hi.